You remember we used to do this in high school sports. Oh yeah, or Gilman.
Gilman.
I just used his real name, and we are recording.
Oh, is it John Gilman?
John Gilman. Yeah, he just goes by Gilman.
Because Gilman's his last name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gilman.
It works. Okay.
Welcome to Emotionships, where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason. I am your host, Charlie Carroll, along with my conservative co-host, Mallory Redmond. Mal, welcome to the program, episode 32. Hard to believe here at
Did your voice just crack?
No, but my voice is giving me trouble. I don't know.
Happening? You need
I don't know.
water?
I don't know. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm gonna just thank you. Why am I conservative? What does that mean? That could mean so many things.
It could mean so many things. In some ways, you're conservative with your Midwest roots before you went out to the West Coast.
Oh
for
yeah,
that
you know what's
education.
so funny? Speaking of Midwest roots,
Yes.
Darren told me yesterday that I'm a true Midwesterner because I left my keys in my car.
Oh,
You don't do that in Seattle.
well, yeah. Do
He
we
said-
do we do it in the Midwest anymore?
I didn't know that. It was an accident. I didn't purposefully leave my keys in my car, but to him, he's not a Midwesterner,
Yeah.
he said that's a Midwest thing.
Oh, true story about my grandfather, Nate, God rest his soul.
Yeah.
Literally in the summer would pull his car up front, like if he were pulling into a grocery store or one of the big box stores, he would pull his Cadillac up front and put it in park and leave it running.
Like not in the parking spaces.
No, not
right?
in a parking spot.
Yeah.
He would pull up front.
Like where the delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leave it running. And he didn't want to turn the car off
What a boss.
so the AC would be rolling.
Sure.
Yeah, he was quite the trip.
Yeah.
But yeah, he would do that, leave his keys in the car. I do it, I guess, every once in a while.
I
but
feel like if you do it with confidence, you could probably get away with it.
Well, I mean, if you have insurance, it is what it is. Somebody takes it, good for them, and file a claim and be on your way.
Okay.
Life is too short to worry about someone stealing your car.
Okay. That's not true, but okay.
Well, it's kind of true.
That's maybe true for you.
Some people downtown here, where we are presently located, leave their cars unlocked on purpose so that if someone is going to try to get into them, they don't smash the windows and break things. And truth be told, it might surprise some people, but the strategy actually works.
Yeah.
That often the people that are breaking windows are people that are in need of just a couple of dollars for that next hit or drink. And so they don't want to steal a computer or a phone or anything like that. They just want to raid your change. And so I literally have seen it work for years, being downtown now for almost a decade. I went to look at my watch to confirm that it was a decade.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yep, decade, being down here a decade. That I've watched it work where if you leave your cars unlocked, they'll take your change and leave the computer there.
Oh.
Yeah, literally have had it happen. Not to me. A couple of people downtown here at varying downtown businesses that I know. Yeah.
Interesting. I definitely do not leave my computer in my car. So that's another option for people.
Yeah. In the news, as we get started this morning, did you see the article in U.S. News about the mighty mice? That they're genetically modifying mice to see if they can do something for astronauts in space where they can genetically modify their biology so that they stay buff and have a lot of muscle in space.
What?
Yeah,
What?
it's true here. It's believe it or not, it's right here today, article out yesterday.
I need you to say that again. What is happening?
Mighty mice stay muscle bound in space. Boon for astronauts. Scientists who sent bulked up mutant mighty mice to International Space Station say the animals held on to their muscle during the month-long flight. I'll explain this.
Please do.
We have some technology over at Body Garage Dayton that creates an electromagnetic field, and it was invented by NASA in the 70s and then approved by the FDA in the 80s for rapid bone repair. And the way this technology works is they created a frequency or a range of frequencies that charge the mitochondria, which is the power pack of your cell. Because they noticed that astronauts, when they go to space and don't have gravity to work their muscles against, right? Like with no gravity, it doesn't matter if your arm is down or up, you can't get that burn.
Yeah.
And so they created this technology to basically replace what was being lost from a lack of gravity, where you can't self-charge yourself through working out, because they noticed that astronauts were getting tired and had no way to move and charge themselves like we do here on Earth. And so they created that, and that technology works. All of the pro football, baseball, and basketball teams have that. And I, as you know, a couple months ago broke a rib and healed my rib very quickly within. Why are you looking at me that way?
I don't know that I knew you broke a rib.
You just know a lot, and you know so much you've forgotten some.
Okay.
You do know that I broke a rib because you were there with me when I broke it.
I am now remembering that. I didn't know that it was broken.
This is a good sign, ladies and gentlemen, when you're doing so much life so fast that you can't remember what has happened.
I remember you being in pain. I didn't know your rib was broken.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I fractured my rib just with how bad it hurt to breathe. But I used PEMF, and within a couple of sessions, the pain was gone. And that's what this device was used for. You sit in chairs, and the way they came up with this is they put these coils in the seats for the astronauts to basically charge them. And so I haven't read this whole article yet about these Mighty Mice. I like the name Mighty Mice, though.
Yeah. Wasn't there a cartoon, a Mighty Mouse?
Mighty Mouse. Did
Gilman?
Did Mighty Mouse have anything to do with Mickey Mouse?
No.
Oh, why do you say it that way?
Because that wasn't a good question.
What do you mean it's not a good question? I thought that Mighty Mouse was the original Mickey Mouse.
No, you didn't. He's not Disney.
No, hold on. There you go again, telling me what I did not think. You can't do that. You can tell me that I'm wrong with what I...
Yeah, you're wrong.
Okay, but you can't tell me that how I thought was wrong, though my thinking was wrong.
I'm pretty sure that doesn't look anything like.
Would you
Mickey.
just read that and tell me what it says?
Mighty Mouse is an American animated anthropomorphic superhero mouse character.
Wow.
Created by the Terry Toons studio for 20th Century Fox. The character was originally called Super Mouse. Made his debut in, do you want to guess the year?
1964.
42.
Whoa. I tried.
Yeah. So that's all that I have about. Do you want me to go further?
No. When did Mickey Mouse come around? If that's 1942, when was Mickey Mouse invented? When did Sir Walt Disney come up with Mickey Mouse?
1928.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's old.
It would feel like Mighty Mouse was a hack of Mickey Mouse.
It would.
Yeah.
Should we go further with that?
No. But nevertheless, it looks like what they're doing now out of Cape Canaveral is that they are bulking these mice up before they send them to space. And it says how ripped they are.
So this is just in order to test the technology?
Yeah, that they're doing some injections and some biohacking for these mice before they go to space to basically make them twice as strong and muscular than the other mice. Who knows? This will hit the American or the human market probably 20 years from now. It's typically how it works.
Wait, so they're not testing the PEMF?
No.
Oh, okay.
PEMF is something they currently use.
Already done.
Yeah,
So
that's already in place. This is a new thing. Mighty Mouse.
Okay.
Or Mighty Mice stay muscle bound in space.
Okay.
Speaking of that, I saw another article, and then we'll move on our way.
Okay, look at you.
Yeah. I'll put these in. I'll put these in the notes of the Air Force testing robot dogs. There's a really cool picture here that you can see, Mal. That and you knew this day was coming because they've already been using drones, which save lives on the battlefield, right? Because now all of a sudden you don't have to walk into that ambush. You can just have a drone fly from overhead. But all of those sci-fi movies we have watched about drones and robots fighting battles.
You have watched.
Yeah, we have watched it. It's on the way.
I haven't watched sci-fi movies. So this is not an actual dog. Let's just clarify.
Well, this is a robot dog, and it has lots of cameras on it, and it can basically run super fast and go spy on the enemy and report back. And I guess in some ways it's bulletproof, but this thing looks like it could very easily lose a leg if it was hit with the right ammunition.
Oh, well, that's not helpful then.
Well, but better to lose a robot dog's leg than
That's true.
a
Very
human
true.
being.
Do they do a video showing you how it moves?
Yeah.
I wonder why they chose a robot dog.
Well,
Why wouldn't, if you
I mean,
want
this,
it, if you want it to be like a fast, darty thing, why wouldn't it be like a cheetah or something? You know? I just feel like a dog is not really known for being like super. Yeah.
no.
What?
You can call it a rabbit if you'd like. It's what
Am I missing something?
I think so.
Oh.
Look, if you look at the picture, there's nothing about this that looks like a dog. They're just calling it a robotic dog.
I understand, but I'm just saying that if it's meant to be something that's like agile and
Well,
whatever,
I mean,
like,
this
why
could
wouldn't
you
they
could
call
call
it
you could call this a cheetah.
well, I could, but I'm just asking why they're not like branding.
I
it
mean,
like
we're gonna
that.
have to. I this could be just
Speaking of dogs,
Brett Tingley
oh, who's that?
and Tyler Rogaway, September 7th article here. They're the ones that called it a robotic dog. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll just have to tune in to see this article. Speaking of dogs, go ahead.
I was gonna ask like the status of your situation
Of,
if you would
of
like to
me
share.
being interested in a dog.
Yeah.
Is that your way of throwing me under the bus
Well,
on the
as
podcast?
as it was, here's the
yes.
hard thing about podcasting is sometimes things come out of my mouth and I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't be saying that. That's why Gilman can edit. Gilman can edit this out if you don't want it.
Look at that big
Public.
smile on his face. He's not
know. He's
editing
loving this.
anything.
He's loving it.
He's not editing anything out of this. I'm currently in negotiations still with my wife.
Oh, okay.
Yes. For those of you that don't know, thank you, Mallory.
Sorry.
Yeah. I
It's
am
relevant.
I am interested in it is very relevant. I'm interested in expanding our services through the security company of well-trained and educated security dogs that are not robots.
Right.
And so usually when as an entrepreneur, when you are going to introduce something to your customers, you start with your own first. And so I am currently in negotiations with my wife to make that a possibility.
Which would mean that you bring in one of these.
Yeah.
Is it a security dog?
Yeah, it is a black Russian terrier.
Yeah, that sounds
Google
terrifying.
It's the size of a lion. But if you want to call it a cheetah, go ahead.
Well, okay.
Yeah. So we're still in negotiations. I don't know how this one is going to turn out yet.
Yep.
But
Could go either way.
We're still
people.
talking about it.
Stay tuned.
Yes. I was thinking about, in light of everything, I don't know if you saw, Mallory is from Chicago, everyone. Over the weekend, over the holiday weekend here in the United States, 51 people died in Chicago through violence. Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
What? I'm not turning this into anything political.
Okay.
I'm just saying it's absolutely crazy. And this is all over the country, whether it's Seattle or, I mean, LA. I don't know if you saw the news about some of the writing there. But that being said, one of the things that I get asked on a regular basis is like, what do we do? How do we stop it? Where do we go from here? And one of the things that I was thinking about is the power of prayer and how even when you say that as a real like potential for change, like a tool, people just kind of they almost don't know what to say because prayer is almost like a fantasy. It's become a fantasy thing or just a religious thing anymore that holds very little value in people's minds because they feel like they have prayed in the past when something was going on and nothing happened.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, especially in light of Emotionships, where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason, why, if you're listening to this, you have to pray even if you do not believe God exists.
Interesting.
That you absolutely, I don't know what's going on.
It gets
with
him
my voice.
choked up, guys.
Yeah. Give me a moment.
Yeah. Get it out.
I'm just emotional.
Sure.
Why you have to pray, even if you don't believe God exists. I was at a dinner party Friday night, and some of those people listen to this podcast. So,
Hello, dinner party guests.
yes. I was just saying that, as we say on the podcast, God does not really exist. Neither do dogs, speaking of the robotic dog, and neither does lasagna. And they all died laughing when I said that lasagna doesn't exist. And the point of me talking that way, for those of you that have tuned into this podcast before, is just to bring up the topic that all of these names are made up of letters that create words to describe realities, but often the reality falls far short, or the description of the reality falls far short. Yeah, far short of the actual reality itself. And so one of the basic problems with the idea or belief in God is that it's very easy as a human being to formulate our opinions about God or God's existence, or allow someone else to formulate our opinion or thoughts about God, and it stops with that reality. But realities, especially when they're alive, are always growing and expanding. And if you're talking about an infinite creative power that created the universe, then the finite will always be working to understand the infinite and will always know less than what they can know, right? No matter how much I know about an infinite God, there will always be more for me to know than what I already know. And so prayer is just a word that is made up of letters that tries to create some sort of understanding or description of a reality, but that description of the reality will always fall short of the reality itself. And so people say, well, I just don't believe in prayer because I don't believe God exists. And what I would say is you can take a different path when it comes to the importance of prayer than the traditional path, which is I pray because God exists. I think you can reverse engineer it, and you can look for different clues that lead you to the same result without going the traditional path, which is I have to believe that God exists in order to lean into the power of prayer. And the path that I would suggest people take is first a journey to discover truth, unbiased truth, right? That it exists and that it can be known. And then two, really dive into what we've only been able to dive into, from a mainstream standpoint over the last several years, which is like quantum physics and the study of energy and particles and nanoparticles and subatomic particles. And what you'll see is that everything is connected. And because everything is connected, there are important realities that if we're ignorant of them, we will suffer for that ignorance, whether it be not receiving things that are good and positive, or falling subject to things that are negative because we were unaware, and we thought that being unaware of something means we're not accountable to it. But I always use gravity as an example. Just because a child is unaware of gravity and decides that they're going to step out over the steps to go downstairs doesn't mean that they don't suffer the results of being ignorant to gravity. And so, if I were God or God's people, going back thousands of years, and I was going to try to describe interacting with an invisible creative force that is full of goodness and light and life, you would have to come up with some way to describe all of those realities, your reality, your thoughts, the means for communicating with this thing, how this thing responded to you. And so I have seen, and I've said this to other people, that you don't have to believe God exists in order to benefit from prayer and living a life of prayer. And there have been books, written about like the law of attraction and how everything is connected. And, your words have a lot to do, and your beliefs and your thoughts have a lot to do with what you attract to yourself. I think of the book The Secret, if someone wants to dive into a book about the law of attraction, but it's definitely out there. And it's just like, when people ask me, seeing all that's going on in the news today and the potential for evil and harm, what can be done? Well, we can start to change everything, to include ourselves, by speaking things out loud and communicating with, by faith, what we believe to be a force for good.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's great. Pause.
Yep.
Can you, I want to go back a little bit, and by a little bit, I mean to the very beginning. Can you just talk about what prayer is?
I mean, that's a great question.
Thanks. I think that's why I'm here.
Yeah. I mean, traditionally speaking, it doesn't matter what world religion it is. Most world religions believe that the intent of the Creator is to communicate with the creation. And traditionally speaking, whether it be meditation or prayer, those are both words made up of letters, which are shapes, to try to describe a reality, so that when more than one person is in a room, we can use that word and everybody can be on the same page. But again, I'm just going to say, and it should be encouraging to everyone, because a lot of people have not had a positive experience with other people's attempts to describe the realities and the benefits of this thing that we call prayer. What I think it really is an invisible connection or bridge to the Creator that allows data to be exchanged, for us to share our heart, which can influence the Creator. We see this, that the Creator can change things and do things differently, because the creation, who's on the ground, boots on the ground per se, articulates what they're seeing and what they're thinking, and they have requests. And this is wrapped up into the fabric of humanity, that when your child asks you for something, though you are planning on doing it differently, if you can change without compromising their health or safety, you change, because you love seeing a smile on their face. And that's part of life and love and goodness and light and all of those things. And so I think what we're talking about really with prayer is a connection that allows data to be transferred back and forth from the infinite, eternal realm to this realm. And we could get deeper into, just our role. The biblical narrative is that our role is to serve as ambassadors, that more than worrying about right and wrong and morality, we're here to be representatives of God on earth. And to do that, you've got to communicate and know what the Creator's intention is about any one given thing. And so a lot of people don't pray, or try to exchange this data for a whole host of reasons. That when I talk about, God's heart being wrapped up in the fabric of humanity, that means that moms and dads have an opportunity, first and foremost, to show their children what God looks like and can be like, or the extreme opposite. And so a lot of people are gun shy to approach this fatherly or motherly figure that we call God, this higher power that is supposed to be looking out for me and protecting me and putting my interests first, because of the practical experience that they had with their parents. Yeah. But we see all kinds of examples throughout God's word that prayer changes things. And again, we don't even have to go there to where we believe that God exists, or that you have to even call it prayer. It's a form of communication.
So that's what I want you to take a second to go a little bit more into, because it's hard for me, because I am a person who prays. Yeah. And so can you just talk, somebody listening who doesn't believe in God, or is where do you begin? Yeah. What does it actually practically look like?
Yeah. I think it would start with some sort of idea as to what inner leading or what sense do you have as to how things should be? We tend as leaders to not put a lot of faith in the general public, like especially as politicians, and parents and pastors can do the exact same thing, where we get lured into believing that we're there to think for our children, or we're there to think for our congregation or the general public. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is, ultimately, leaders are there to live in by example, and to provide an example for those people. And I think that you have to have an idea of what it is that should happen, or what your life is about, in order to pray. Prayer is a tool that God has given us to change things. And when I say that, often people go too far and then say, well, what if I don't want what God wants? And that's an indication for me that somebody already misrepresented God to you, even if it was just the situation that you were raised in at home, or maybe you were raised in a church that, and this is unfortunately the norm, throughout a lot of denominations, that person that was in charge, that priest or that pastor, did not know what they did not know, and used their position to serve themselves and make themselves feel better about their life and what they were doing. But you have to have some sort of sense as to what should be. And then prayer is voicing those things and speaking those things out loud, and getting a better sense of what's going on, or what that creative power's will is for that specific situation. And so, an example would be, often I feel or even hear the words that are spoken about me from people that often are not in my immediate context. They're left to perceive or interpret my actions or my behavior from a distance, and they don't get it, so they judge me and speak negatively about me to others. Other cases are people that have worked for me and just disagree, or I haven't handled something perfectly. They don't understand because they haven't been in that position before, or maybe I was just flat out wrong. But instead of the end result is they talk negatively. And so when I take that to prayer, to voice things out loud, it is really my effort to put my beliefs in front of my feelings, and to do my best to hear what I think God is saying to me about the situation, so that I have insight and wisdom as to what's the best way to respond to this. And often I'll say, I'll just declare out loud that the words of my enemies will not be effective when it comes to hindering or keeping anything from my life. That when they voice things in secret to other people, that those words will not get traction. There are other things where I'll get a sense for something, I'll see something, and I'll get a sense for, I think God wants that to be a part of my life, not for my own selfish benefit, but ultimately to serve others. Mm-hmm. And so I'll start talking about that, or keeping this ongoing narrative with the creative entity of the universe about that. And what I have found is that draws that opportunity, or the receiving of that opportunity to me, through the initial birthing of that reality that started with a thought. And then I literally turned it into a physical something when a word came out of my mouth. Everything that has been created out of God. So though God shows love and gives love, God is love. Everything encompasses him. And so when I say that you can get to God and reverse engineer your approach to God by starting with some of his creation, and that leads you to the same person, that is a true statement. And so when I'm talking about prayer, like the idea of the law of attraction and speaking things out loud to create those realities, like that is a reality of who God is. when we, from a Christian narrative or a Jewish narrative, when you read the book of Genesis, when God wanted to create the world and nothing existed, it was a void, is what is, just an empty black void. What we're told is that God started speaking things into existence. And so the fact that we are created, that one chapter over in the book of Genesis says that we were created as a carbon copy or a phantom of God to be God here on earth and be representatives of God here on earth. What I'm saying is we can use our words to be like God and speak them out in order to create things. And the truth of the matter is, and this will probably make some people uncomfortable, you don't have to be connected to God to behave as God and to speak certain things into existence and have them come true. A lot of people's biggest problem is that they are their biggest accuser, and they always say things about what won't work and why it's not going to happen. And so God has never been the kind of God that takes things back just because people are not using them in context. I mean, it's part of who he is, that he's true to his character, that he has bound himself by his own character. And when he creates human beings and gives them the ability to create life, not only through their offspring and children and grandchildren, but with their words, he's not taking it back. Yeah. And that's some of the truth that is found when Jesus said that the rain falls on the just and the unjust. Rain, obviously, back in those agriculture days was a huge thing. It was a big blessing that God has it rain. And sometimes people have their life right and they're in good standing with God and have a great relationship and they experience rain. But there are also people who are not at their best yet and they're struggling and working through the trauma and bondage of their past and their unbelief, and they experience the rain too. Mm-hmm. And so we have been given the ability as part of God's creation to act and behave as God. And part of that is prayer, where we voice thoughts and feelings out in the air. And that is the initial, it has the potential to begin to be the beginning of something coming to life. And it's really about tapping into this quantum realm where nothing is separated. And by speaking certain truths into existence, you attract those realities to yourself. If somebody were to ask me, well, then what keeps people from, envisioning themselves, being a billionaire and having their own companies and no worries, which is a fallacy in and of itself, that you're never going to have no worries. And the more you have, the more you have to worry about. But one of the things that works in the quantum realm, which is just a scientific way to describe realities, I think were being described thousands of years ago. We just didn't have the scientific terms for them yet, is to understand that the right motive has to be behind the words. And what I have found with the law of attraction and nanoparticles is that it's not about the substance of the word, it's about the vibration and frequency, or the hertz involved in the word. And so when I have a negative motivation where I want a lot of money or feel like a lot of money will make me happy, though I'm thinking that way and I really believe it, I'm ignorant of the fact that money doesn't make people happy. And so because truth is impregnated in the universe, it's when I become one with truth, which is the biblical word for righteousness, which means alignment, and then I speak it out, that's when there's this magnetic, magical connection that happens, and I draw those things to me. I'll give you an example. Amy and I were trying to buy the house that we currently live in 3 years ago now, and I negotiated a deal that we would lease the house for the first year with a certain amount of the payment going to the house, and then after the year was up, because of the amount of businesses that we have, it takes a long time to get my taxes done. And once the year was gone, I would have all of the taxes done for all of these businesses, which would mean my personal taxes could be done, and we would close on the house. And so the closer we got to closing, my banker within 2 weeks of closing said, hey, I know that I told you that I could close this loan with 5% down, but you're going to have to do 20% down or else I'm not going to be able to close the loan. Well, the problem with that was I had already put $50,000 cash down on this house, and I didn't know if I would be able to come up with the 15% difference, which represented another $90,000.
Okay.
And so interestingly enough, earlier, a month or two earlier, the Lord had pointed out an asset online that I had been thinking about buying to try to flip it, but it was just very difficult to find this asset. That it was just very rare. And so, I'll never forget the day when my banker calls me and says, like, I know I told you that I could do 5% down, but I need to do 20%. And I just thought to myself, well, I don't know what I'm going to do this quick in order to move this, because $90,000 is a lot of cash to come up with. And that night I was going to bed, and I'll call it God, right? Because that's how I describe the reality of this eternal, infinite, supernatural, creative power that wants to interact with mankind. God says to me, go get on the computer, go get on eBay. And it's like, nah, it's 11:30 at night. I'm ready for bed. I'm tired.
Right.
And I hear it again. So I turn around. I'm almost into my bedroom. I turn around, go in the office, pull up eBay, and there are less than 10 of these items in the world. And I find it, which I had always searched, a lot of dozens of sites. I find it, and basically a person had bought this and basically just wanted out of it really quick. And so I sent them an email saying, hey, if this is real and this is the real price that you want it for, like, I'm in and I will buy it from you tomorrow. Well, I send that message, and it's 11:30, and I go to bed, or try to go to bed. I can't sleep just thinking, like, could this be real?
What's happening?
Yeah, could this be real? And sure enough, I have a message from them the next morning about this property, and they say, yeah, it's available, and yes, this is the real price. And so I call someone that was in this area, and I knew they would be interested in this property. I sell the property before I even buy it. And then I turn around and buy the property, and the profit in the transaction was $89,000. And that became the difference, the 15% difference between what I was told I would have to put down on the house and then what I had to bring to the table. And so there are situations like that where, though I, did not get in a posture of prayer, I had an awareness. I feel like originally, a month or months before I even needed that asset, that it was pointed out to me. And I thought, I just had normal thoughts like, man, I think I could make a good margin off of that if I could ever get my hands on that.
Yeah.
And so then the opportunity presents itself. My intentions are right with it. And next thing you know, it shows up the day I need it to show up, and everything happens and goes down. And someone would say, well, is that the way it always works? And I'd say, of course not. Because I don't have the perspective that this creative, light, love-filled creator has. He has a much better perspective than I do. And God has told me no a lot more times than he's ever told me yes. And that's because he has a better picture and understanding from his perspective. The biblical narrative is that he knows us before we were even born. Like, he sees our whole life from front to back. And so, when you have Albert Einstein, spending the second half of his life writing about quantum physics and the quantum realm and nanoparticles and the law of attraction and how energy works, all we're doing is learning to describe in scientific terms this creative entity that has our best interest in mind and how to interact with him.
That was a lot.
It was a lot.
I have so many questions. I think recently, the power of prayer has been diluted just by saying that you're praying.
For sure.
Like hashtag thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, for sure.
Like that is, that is the common response now, particularly by those in leadership roles when something terrible happens.
Yeah.
You have my thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, for sure.
And seemingly nothing changes. And I think that's where I'm even tempted to get frustrated just looking at on a global scale.
Sure.
Just how much, and I guess we've brought it up before, just like the role of evil. Evil still exists, even though prayer is real and powerful and a thing that we have access to.
And let's do this. Let's define what evil is. Evil is an absence of light. That's what it is. And so where the light ceases to exist, evil will spread.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we get into, people saying, my thoughts and prayers are with you, it's because of the Judeo-Christian roots that we have in this country. But like anything, we've said many times on this podcast, the more potential something has for bringing benefit or blessing to a person's life, the more potential it has for being misrepresented. And I often take it to sex, that sex has a tremendous amount of potential when it comes to growing intimacy between two people. But sex also has a tremendous amount of potential to be abused.
Yeah. For sure.
Same thing with, different herbs and plants and things that God has given us. Like we actually need to do a whole episode on THC and marijuana and the cannabinoid receptor on the human cell and what God intended for marijuana to be used for. But it also can be abused, very much abused. Mm-hmm. And so I don't blame anyone that is down on or given up on prayer, because like anything else that is really good, there's a lot underneath the surface. And if you don't have the spirit of it right, if the intention's not right, not going to work for you.
So how do you know if your intention is right?
Well, I would say ultimately deep down, you got to look at your motives and you got to ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I praying this? Why am I asking for this? And the other side of it is, it's hard to believe as human beings sometimes that this idea of God does want to bless you, because we have a hard time separating the phases of our life. You remember when you were little and your parents told you could not do something and you were so mad at them because you thought they were out to get you? We do that with God all the time, that we don't understand the unique phases of a person's journey, where in some portion or phase of your life, you are a child that is being developed, and we look at God and stomp our feet and sit down and are mad because we think God's trying to keep something from us or take something from us. Mm-hmm. The first third to the first half of your life, depending upon, how much you cooperate, is going to be development. And some people never make it out of the development phase, and they just give up and throw their cards in because they think God was against them. And it's just not the case. Jesus lived in obscurity for 30 years and then had 3 years of ministry. Mm-hmm. So it's a 10-to-1 ratio, development to display, right? I was developed for 10 times the amount of time that I got to display my passions and gifts and bring them to the world in the life of Jesus. Moses was, a solid 80 years of development for 40 years of leading and having influence.
So what if there's somebody who has been praying for something, whether personal or like on a more kind of like cultural level or societal level, and it's just not happening? Like, let me use an example
Sure.
of like somebody who's single that wants to be married. Like that seems
Great
like
example.
a good, thank you.
Yeah.
That seems like a good and I don't know, like that's just a desire that seems to be full of integrity.
Sure. Yeah. So I had a counseling session with someone on the phone the other night about this very topic.
Oh, perfect.
Super, super, super talented person, super talented. And the desire of their heart is to be married. This is a woman, and a pretty woman, talented woman, pure, authentic desire to be married. And we were talking, and she said, do you think my issues with my dad, from my dad leaving my mom when I was around 10 years old, has affected things? And the idea was maybe, depending upon how you have responded and what you're thinking about it now. Of course it affected you when you were younger. I said, here's the issue. God loves you too much to allow you to put the idea of being married in a hole that is keeping you, at least in your mind, from being happy. Meaning that her thought process at this point in time is, and I often ask people this in a counseling session, like, what is it right now? What answer can you give me that if I asked you, what is it that's keeping your life from being perfect? Right? And obviously we know there's no such thing as a perfect life, but in your mind, what are one or two things that if you had them, you would feel like you're a lot further down the road? Mm-hmm. And in this young woman's case, it's, I don't have a husband. Yeah. And so then what I said to her is, you have a gap or something that you sense is missing, and that is stealing your happiness, right? Or you're not able to be as excited about life as you could be if you had Mr. or Mrs. Right. And I said, here's what God is doing. Probably because of what happened to you when you were younger, though it did not have to be this way in order for people to think this like this. Probably what has happened is there was something that you saw, or having to go back and forth between mom and dad, put something in you that was more focused around that idea of a good husband or being a good wife. And that gap has kept you from learning to grow that out of your life, where you can say, I don't need anything from the outside in order to be whole or complete. And what I have found, and this is why I said that the intention behind your prayer requests have to be correct. They have to be lined up. The right way for this to happen, if someone is single and listening to this, you are most qualified and most prepared to have your prayers answered when you do not need that husband to make you happy. When you can really get your life, and let's get super technical here, your life is measured in vibrations per second. We call them hertz. A good attitude vibrates a lot faster than a bad attitude. To smile takes a lot more muscles, uses more muscles than to frown, right? Life is about like actual movement. That's what we're talking about when we talk about life, like more energetic movement, more life, more strength, more vitality, more power. So in this young woman's example, when your life can be more whole without being manipulated from anything from the outside, you are more aligned and more qualified to have your prayers answered. Not more qualified from this is God's intention for you, but from a practical standpoint of your responsibility, you are more lined up to pray, God, I want this person in my life as soon as possible for the right reasons. Because the marriages that end the quickest, or the marriages that have the most dysfunction, are marriages where I need my spouse to be happy. Yeah. I need my spouse in a certain role. I need my spouse to act a certain way. I can't imagine living without my spouse. If that's the case, if that's me, if I have that hole or that gap in me, I have given you so much power to make or break my life. I will never have the peace or the sense of joy that I was made to have, because that peace and joy is based on something from the outside that will never be perfect, will fluctuate, come and go, which will steal things from me and affect my life and will keep me from being the spouse that I need to be. Right. And so I said to her in this situation, like, you need to focus on, through journaling and making lists and prayer and meditation, evaluating the lies that would tell you, if I had this, I would be better off. And my experience is, the sooner you can get to a place where you are content in not having a husband, you will be more positioned and more ready to receive that husband, because God likes to give his children good gifts. And sometimes a good thing can become a bad gift when that person is not prepared to handle it or to interact with it.
Yeah, that's good. What about just another quick little question here. What about in the case of like healing, like something that you did have that was taken away? Or like we've talked about the family that you knew or know whose 3-year-old son was killed,
Right.
like something like that, where it's like you're praying for either physical healing or emotional healing. I don't know. For some reason, that seems different to me than like praying.
Well, it's perspective too, right? We've already hit on this with prayer, that prayer has a lot to do with perspective. I have had a couple of situations like that, going to Will is his name, that was 3 years old and passed through an accident unexpectedly. If you read, which I've encouraged people to read, Proof of Heaven, and there are other books other than Proof of Heaven, like To Heaven and Back, and these are coming from like neuroscientists and neurologists that have these life after death experiences, and because of how they've invested their life here on earth, they can write and communicate on a different level than the average person can, right? Because and this has something to do with prayer, and then I'll come back to answering what you were saying.
Okay.
The more I get in alignment through prayer with God, he can lead me into environments. He can move my feet into environments that affect my heart, which affects my head. And if I won't follow God into certain environments, I'll never be prepared with the vernacular or the components, understanding of certain truths and realities to describe what I see when I get to where I'm going, right? And so when you see a neurologist have a life after death experience and they know the human body as well as they do, they're going to be able to write a book more in depth than the mechanic, which there's a need for a mechanic. But an auto mechanic is not going to be able to go to heaven and have this life after death experience and talk about what was going on with the biology as well as, and so it's just another reason why prayer is so important, because prayer is about alignment and leading, and God will position you often in order to get you ready to receive something. When I was teaching all of my kids to catch a ball, the first two things that I had to do was put their feet in a certain place, and then I had to hold their hand out and put a glove there, and it was my responsibility to get that ball in that glove to teach them the initial foundational steps to receiving something. Yeah. God does the same thing with us, and prayer is a big part of that. And so when it comes to how do you wrap your mind around, as a parent, which, I was there with and have stood beside these parents, not that means I've experienced the feelings to the depth that they have, but one of the things that I know to be true is that, and what God told me about Will on the day of his memorial service, is that when his parents get to heaven, which is an entirely different perspective, right?
Yeah, sure.
Finally being in heaven where there is no more sickness, there is no more sorrow, they will thank God for allowing this situation to happen to them. And what we already know through the parents' influence is hundreds of lives, probably thousands of lives, have been affected by how the parents have responded to the situation. Yeah. And so if you think about living in heaven for 100 million years, right? 100 million years, and you haven't even gotten to 1% of 1% of 1% of your time in eternity, that will never stop, never die, there will be no darkness, no evil, none of what we're seeing now, for, fractionally speaking, our 70 years or our 100 years here on earth don't even show up on the screen compared to eternity. Yeah. So within this short period of time that at least the Bible advocates is an opportunity to invest in eternity, you can see why God would say to me that those parents will thank him for allowing them to go through this in such a short period of time with such lasting benefits, where hundreds, if not thousands, maybe tens of thousands, inherited and received and went to heaven because of Will's story.
Right.
And so what's the summary of the question you asked? It's about perspective. And God doesn't expect us to always, get there quickly or to even fully get that he would ask us to do and be okay with some things that happen here on earth that seem unbearable and absurd at times. Mm-hmm. But I think, we're playing a long game, and God knows that. And sometimes God doesn't need us to be on board or okay with everything or to understand everything in order to still move forward.
Sure. I think perspective is that's like the word to walk away with after having this conversation, because those parents could have easily stopped living their lives when their son lost his life. Yeah. And same for like somebody who's wanting a spouse and doesn't have one. Like, it's so easy to let your disappointment or grief or whatever, fill in the blank, keep you from living your life.
Yeah.
And
one of the greatest promises that I read on a regular basis is from Psalm chapter 1, that it says, the person that delights themselves, that gets their joy from understanding God, and the psalmist said thousands of years ago that they delight themselves in the law of the Lord. And really that's just talking about someone that makes it their mission to understand God. Mm-hmm. Finishes in verse 3, Psalm 1:3, by saying, everything they put their hand to, everything they do prospers. Yeah. And the reason for that, and this is the heart of prayer, is they took the time to hear what they thought God was saying. And when you do that, God moves us, even when we don't fully understand it or see it, to position us, like I did with my children, to catch those things that he has for us that ultimately are meant to be shared with the world.
Yeah. That's good.
And so you don't have to believe in God to pray and to benefit from the benefits of prayer. It's just a reality that we do our best to describe with this word we call prayer. But the truth of the matter is, you are like God in that you have the ability to have thoughts about good or bad, light or darkness, and speak things out into existence that with the right intention can create a lot of good for a lot of people and can right a lot of wrong that we're seeing in the universe.
Okay, so let's give the phone number, because I just have a sense that at least somebody has a question or comment about what was just talked about.
937-303-4788. Only took 32 episodes to get the number right.
Well done.
If you have any questions or you want to interact with us, which we want to interact with people.
Yeah, for sure.
937-303-4788. Text us. Just text us.
Just say hey.
Yes, and we will respond. We'll be faithful to respond. All right, that's it. Episode 32. Right? Yeah. Till next time.